All right, welcome back to another episode of the Dental Marketing Secrets Podcast, episode number 128, Creating a Vision Worth Building. And really what we're talking about today is, what do you actually want your practice to look like? So if we were to fast forward 5 years into the future and your practice is wildly successful, what would a typical Tuesday look like for you? It's funny, when I meet with doctors, a lot of times they can tell you all the numbers. They can tell you the revenue goals. They can tell you new patient goals. They can tell you production goals, right? But very few can answer in detail what procedures they are doing, as far as what do they want to really be focusing on, how many days they are working, do they have associates, what role do they personally play in the practice, where are new patients coming from, how does the practice feel? Being able to truly answer all of those questions as far as what their vision is for the practice, most people don't. They have an idea, right? They might say, oh, it would be nice to do more of these type of procedures, but they haven't taken the time to figure out exactly what that would look like in terms of, I would love to be doing 8 to 10 of these a week, these specific procedures, which would allow me to then cut back on doing these type of procedures. I would have an associate handle those. I'd have my team handle all of these responsibilities. And I just focus on this, this, and this. They haven't gotten to the point where that is a fully fleshed out vision. And the problem with that is that if you don't define your vision, your practice will create one for you by default. And that's not a great thing. Typically, there might be some elements that are okay with you, but generally it's not going to be designed around what you ultimately would like to achieve. So if we're looking at this from a practice level, most practices focus on the numbers. Like I mentioned, they focus on collections, they focus on production, they focus on new patients. And those are important. That is part of the vision, but it's not all of the vision. That's not really the full. If you think of vision, you think of the visual element of it. That is a key part of it. Don't get me wrong, that the goals are important and you should focus on those. But the vision, what we're talking about is that, what kind of practice do I want to build? What do I want people to walk away feeling? How do I want to be known in the community? What kind of patients am I going to treat? What kind of life ultimately do I want for myself? Because life includes your time at the practice, includes your time at home. And for those that don't take the time to really figure out what they really want and then work towards that, a lot of times those get mixed, those get blended, and they're doing work at home. They never really leave the office, so to speak. It's always weighing on them because they have accepted so many responsibilities and they just let things go by default, right? So here's an example. Let's go this way. So if you have a goal of, I want to collect 2 million. I want to collect 2 million is your goal. And your vision is, I work 4 days a week. I focus on Invisalign and cosmetic cases. I have a thriving hygiene department, and I spend Fridays with my family. Those are two very different things, right? I mean, you've got the goal, the numerical goal of 2 million in collections. And now you have the vision of what your daily life would look like, what that practice would actually feel and look like, the experiential part of that. You're working 4 days a week. You're doing more Invisalign. You're doing more cosmetic. You are relying on a very healthy, thriving hygiene department. And then you're spending Fridays with your family. And just that alone, I mean, even if you just took that last part alone, spending Fridays with my family, what would you need to do in order to feel comfortable and confident to spend that Friday with your family? Well, that would probably mean that you need to have things in order. You need to have specific roles for your team. You need to have people bought in to the system that you've created. You would have very well thought out systems in place so that you can accomplish more and do it consistently week in and week out. So the vision helps you kind of reverse engineer that process. If you want to work 4 days a week, okay, then you need to look at, well, how much do I need to produce? If you have your 2 million in collection goal, how much does that equate to doing 4 days a week? And then you think, okay, how do I get there? Or if I want to focus more on Invisalign and cosmetic cases, again, how do I get there? What am I doing to attract more of those type of cases, more of those type of patients? So goals, one way to look at it is goals tell you where you're going, and vision tells you what it looks like when you get there. It's kind of the visual side of it, how you experience those goals when you get there. And one thing to remember in all this is that revenue is kind of like the scoreboard, and vision is really more of the game plan. This is how we're going to do that. So, but I did want to touch on, what happens if you don't take the time to intentionally design what your vision's going to be? Because a lot of doctors don't do that. They never carve out the time to figure out, what do I really want from my practice? What do I really want my life to look like? How can I design that? How can I engineer that type of lifestyle? And how could I engineer that type of culture and all those systems in place for my practice? They think it would be nice, but they don't actually spend the time to engineer that process, to think through it and say, well, if I want to get here, then I need this, this, and this in place in order to do that. Instead, they let patients dictate their treatment, their kind of default to insurance, thinking that they don't really have an option. They let them dictate the pricing, staffing. They kind of let their staff handle it because they're worried or they're unsure how to proceed. So they let the team handle it, and that might not be the best direction. They might be trying their best, but it might not be the best result or where you want to take the practice. You let marketing kind of determine what patients you'll see, and that could just be, incongruency with your goals, right? They might be able to bring in these patients that are, maybe they're more insurance-based. Maybe they're just looking for a cleaning, or maybe they're just emergency or urgent care cases that only stay once and then they leave. And that doesn't jive with your goals. For some, that would be perfect, right? It all depends on what type of vision that you're creating for your practice. But if you're not intentionally looking at that, if you're not spending time breaking that down and seeing how that fits in with your overall vision, then you're going to end up in a place where you don't want to be. Oftentimes I'll hear this isn't really the practice that I wanted. And then they realize that years later. And when it's never too late to change, but there's times when it's better to start now. It's always better to start now. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. And the second best time is right now. So another way to look at this is a vague vision creates vague results. Whereas a specific vision or a detailed vision creates specific results. And that's really the point that we're trying to make with this whole episode is be intentional about how you're creating your practice. Don't just default to what happens and then react. Be proactive in engineering what that looks like. You can change that. You can absolutely change that. It may take time, but you can absolutely create that vision for yourself. So a few other examples that I see a lot, just to throw them out there, just to see if you've experienced this at all. A lot of docs that I talk to, they want to do more cosmetic work. Plain and simple, they enjoy doing it. It's high value. Don't have to do as much of it. But because they just have that desire and they don't act on it, and as a result, they don't do as much as they would like to. They end up spending more of their time doing fillings and restorative and things like that they would rather not do when all is said and done. Or they might want more freedom, more time with the family, less time at the office. But they aren't taking the time really to figure out, how do I do that? How can I have my office support me and support the practice even when I'm not there, even when I'm not working? How can I allow my team to develop their their responsibilities and their capacity to do more each week. Or let's say you want to become more of a referral-based practice and you don't know how, or you don't do anything about it. And as a result, you stay dependent on marketing and advertising, right? On spending thousands of dollars each month. It might be working, some months might not be, but you just feel beholden to do that. Otherwise, nothing's coming in, right? So these are things that you see all the time, but they can be changed. And that's the beauty of all this, is that it takes the vision really to first kickstart that. And then from there, it makes it easier to break it down, reverse engineer that process step by step so that you can make progress towards it. Okay. Again, most practices are just built by default instead of by design. And the absence of vision is still a vision. It's just not the one created. It's just the one that's, I meant to say, only created by circumstance. If you want to be the one to actually write that story and write that vision, you can. Otherwise, someone else is going to write it for you just by default. So a couple of questions. I've written down a couple of questions to think about. Ask yourself, what procedures do I love? If I could do more of these week in and week out, what would I love to do? What gets me excited? What gets me eager to come to the practice and get going? What procedures do I want less of? You're looking at both ends of the spectrum. What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? What's great about this latter one, what do I want to do less of? If you remove that or reduce that, now it frees up more time to figure out, how do I do more of these type of procedures? That's where some of the time comes from. And you might think, well, I don't want to lose these other things. And it just depends on where you want to go. Do you want to stay where you are? Or do you want to make changes? Do you want to improve your quality of life, the quality of your practice, the quality of patients? Do you want to improve that experience? And if so, you're going to have to make some changes. And it's going to be a little tough, honestly, because anytime you change, it's hard. You're not as familiar. You're going to have a tendency to want to revert back to what you know and are comfortable with, especially with a team. They're going to want to be like, well, why would you do that when we have a patient that needs these billings? You say, well, because it doesn't align with where I want to be. And that can be tough, right? But this is all part of the process, and that's okay. You're going to make progress. You're 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's going to happen again and again. Another question to ask is, what percentage of production comes from specialty services? Okay. So think about that mix. What do I love? What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? What percentage of production comes from specialty services? Think about those specific type of procedures. Like I mentioned, do you want to do more implants? Do you want to do more Invisalign or cosmetic or airway or full arch cases, or whatever the case may be, whatever excites you and you would love to do more of, that makes sense to do? That's a good thing to focus on, because then you're going to be able to build a system to help support that. It's going to help you identify, well, if I want my patients to understand the importance of, cosmetic dentistry, or where that can fit into their lives, then I'm going to need to help educate them on everything that it can do, right? It's not just for looks alone. For example, it could be, you want to help them see what their options are, and really the confidence and the quality of life that comes from a assurance about your appearance. It is, there's aesthetics involved, but it's more than that. It's much, much more than that, right? And it doesn't have to be as complex as some people think, right? It doesn't have to be a huge smile makeover or an 8 or 10 veneer case. It can be bonding. You can just do some simple cosmetic bonding, and that alone can do wonders for your patients. So it's just, you think about all the things and all the questions that they might have of these services that you'd like to, these treatments that you'd like to do more of, and then you can build out assets accordingly. So it's cool. It gives you that direction. And now you can think, okay, yes, let's do all these. Let's create these materials to help my patients feel confident in moving forward, to help them feel like they have options and that they can make an educated decision, and gives you the chance to really provide value up front, and help them better understand why you would recommend doing that. A few other questions to ask. This is more focused on your overall team and your practice, right? Is what do I want associates? Does that play into my vision? How many hygienists do I have on staff? If I want to build a really healthy, thriving hygiene department, do I want 2? Do I want 3? Do I want 4? What does that look like? What responsibilities stay with me as the doctor? What responsibilities are mine week in and week out, month after month? And what responsibilities can I delegate to my team? Okay. Now think about, so that's team. There's a lot involved there. I'm not going to spend a ton of time there. I just want to throw out these questions. These are great questions to ask yourself. Lifestyle. How many hours a week do I work? How many days do I work? How much vacation time am I willing to take each year? What level of stress am I willing to tolerate? So it's all building out a detailed vision. You want to be able to see yourself, and I'm closing my eyes as we say that. You want to be able to picture yourself in that moment, having realized that outcome, and explore what that feels like. Explore what happens during the day. You come in, you're excited because you have, let's say, 3 cosmetic cases that day. That's all that's on your schedule. And you're super pumped because your patients are excited. They are coming away with a brand new smile that's some of them will leave in tears because they've never felt this way about themselves, or it's been a really long time since they have. And you're walking away, your team's got are handling everything else. Your hygiene's pumping out patients. They're doing awesome. You're really great about delivering that experience with your patients so that they want to refer. They can't help but refer other people because you go above and beyond. You build in these moments where you exceed expectations, and now they're just, who does this? No other practice in the world does this. And now they're talking about you all the time. Your referrals keep coming in. What does that vision really look like? Last few questions to ask would be, who are my ideal patients? What do they value? And what experience do they expect? That last one's important too, that a lot of people don't ask. They just say, well, I want good patients. I want a good patient. I had many times I hear that. I just want good patients. But they don't really know exactly what that means. They know that it means that they would accept treatment or they want to move forward with bigger cases, for example. But really, what does that mean? And then what do they expect by doing that? And that's something we don't often think about. We want them to accept the treatment, but we don't always attach that last question of, what do they expect in return? If they're going to be this type of quality patient, what type of quality they expect on our end to deliver that, to make them feel comfortable, to get them to say, absolutely, I will move forward. So those are some questions to ask yourself. And take your time. They're going to evolve over time as you work towards them. And then you might realize, on second thought, it's not exactly what I thought. Let's tweak this here. Let's adjust this over here. So that will be a very fluid living kind of document as you build that out. But I wanted to share a vision that I have. This is one of our services that we provide. It's called Referral Advantage. It's for practices that want to be more referral based. They say, we want more referrals, but they don't really do anything about it. And so here's what that looks like. So I built out the vision that I have for our Referral Advantage program. And our clients are 75% or more of your patients come from referrals. 75% or more. Acquisition costs are dramatically lower because they're referrals. Your conversion rates are higher. You're not dependent on Google ads or SEO or Facebook and Instagram ads. And you're not having to spend hours and hours and hours each week on social media, posting and posting and posting. Instead, you have patients that truly value who you are and your services and your expertise. They're raving fans. Like I mentioned before, they can't help but talk about your practice. So referrals as a result happen naturally. Yes, there are things that you would do as a practice to proactively orchestrate these referrals, but referrals are happening all the time. Your practice as a result is seen as a pillar in the community, as a necessity. People know you. You're, like I say, 5 Mile famous, where people in the neighborhood, they just know who your practice is. Like, oh yeah, I know Dr. Mark. Everyone knows Dr. Mark, And as a result, you're not chasing leads anymore. Those leads are coming to you. That is such a different experience. Rather than you hunting down these leads, they're actually the ones clamoring. They're picking up your phone. Do you have an opening for me? They're the ones coming to you. And that's the vision. That's what we help our practices create with our referral advantage program. And so I want you to be, and I'm just using that as an example. I want you to be that specific where you can detail out what that looks like and how that affects your practice, your team, your day-to-day, your responsibilities, your home life. And that's such a good, it's so powerful because it really starts to help you see what's possible. Helps open your mindset and think, oh my gosh, that is exactly what I want. And this gives you kind of ways to start to improve on that, because you're going to look at it and say, well, I need this in place in order to do that. And that's really the next process. Once you've asked yourself those questions, you've written down the answers, and now you've built out a clear vision of what you want, being as detailed as possible. Now it's up to, how do I reverse engineer that process? What would need to be true if, for example, I want to do more cosmetic, I want to do 8 to 10 cosmetic cases a week, or I want to have 75% of my new patients come from referrals. What needs to happen in order for that? What needs to be true in my practice in order for that to happen? In the referral case, patient experience has to improve. I have to be really good at setting expectations so that they know what to expect, and then be really good at exceeding those expectations every single time. And that doesn't take a whole lot, to be honest. It is not, I'm not asking you to go and spend hours and hours and hours extra from what you're already doing. Really, what it involves is, like I mentioned before, setting the expectation, because that's what's going to help patients look for it. Once they know what to look for, then it's so much easier to exceed that expectation. And now they're like, well, he did this for me. She did this for me. I didn't ask her to. I don't know what they were doing, but they were so cool. Like they did this and this and this. So what does that look like? I mean, it can look like a lot of different things, right? I use this example a lot, but when I was first starting photography, one of the things that I do for my clients during the onboarding process was just ask them what, among other things, I would ask them, what is your favorite treat? What's your favorite candy? What's your favorite drink or whatever? And they'd fill it out. Didn't think twice. There was, this is one of 20 questions I was asking them. But then when it came to the end result, I would deliver their photos, for example, is all really well done. Nice presentation, has like all this stuff. But then I'd also include their favorite candy or their favorite treat. And they were just blown away by that. They just thought, how on earth did you know that this was my favorite thing to eat? One, and two, that I would actually do that for them, and that was just one of a couple of different things that I would do just to set the expectation, and then exceed it. Another good example was just in terms of letting them know what to expect afterwards. After we were done with the shoot or the session, I would say it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks to process all these images, get them back to you, blah, blah, blah. Set the expectation. And then undoubtedly, I would get them done in a week. And so they knew what it was. They were expecting 3 to 4 weeks. I'd come back in a week, let them know that they were ready, that I was super excited because I got them done early. And that was huge. I mean, they just couldn't stop raving about that. They would share it. They're already in a moment, like where they're sharing it with their friends. So this just accelerated that, poured gasoline on the fire, right? So, and you can do that same thing with your patients. It's just those small little tweaks, great discussion for your team to figure out what does that look like for our practice? How can we set that expectation and then exceed it every single time? And it's going to improve your referrals, plain and simple. So vision first, strategy second. Vision, detailed vision, you're experiencing, you're there, it's the outcome that you want. Strategy comes, how do I achieve that vision? So that's really what the goal is. So the action items then would be answer those questions that I mentioned before. You can also write down, imagine if you're kind of thinking, another way to look at it too is do this type of exercise where you're say 5 years from now, what do I want my schedule to look like? What procedures am I doing? Where are my patients coming from? What does my team look like? And how are they involved on a day-to-day basis? What am I not doing anymore that I used to do? You can just start with those questions too. And that's going to help you really start creating that vision that you want for you and your practice. Final thoughts would be your practice is going somewhere, whether you design it or not. The question is whether you are intentional about building it or simply reacting to whatever comes next. So the clearer the vision, easier everything else becomes. Easier the marketing, easier the hiring, easier all your business decisions become because you have that clear vision. You can use that as a filter or a gauge to hold that up against and say, does this align with where I'm trying to go? Does this align with the outcome that I'm hoping to achieve? And if not, it's going to make it an easier answer, right? Then you have to decide. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. This is one thing that's really helped me a lot and a lot of our clients is once they really grab hold of that vision, then it creates an identity. It creates momentum as a team. It helps them channel their efforts and their focus into building that and realizing that vision. And then you get to where you want to go, most importantly. And that's the cool part. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a review. That helps other people find the podcast and enjoy it as well. Just review it wherever you're listening to the podcast. Just take 30 seconds. Give us a rating, write some feedback. That would be tremendous. That would make my day. And we will see you next time, my friends.